I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending Friday, October the 2nd. And this loss just keeps going down so hard and so fast in the cattle market. It makes us wonder when is enough enough? And I think we're starting to get there. It's just been so fast and so sharp that we're going to have to see some correction or some little bit of recovery here before we get too much further into the fall, because we're getting to the point now where this thing really is oversold, especially on the cash side, because the board's just chasing it lower and can't seem to catch it as hard as it's fallen. But live cattle this past week were lower hard, $10.23 lower for the week, despite being $1.67 higher on Friday there, but closing at 123.07, which is really on the high side of where fat sold this past week. Your fat cattle sold in the Southern Plains from 118 to 124. Northern Plains live sales was 116 to 122, with a few live sales in Iowa down to 114, and that's roughly $10 lower, which is a hunk. Your dress sales in the Northern Plains 185 to 190, and that's really $15 lower, which you just don't see those kind of losses unless there's just some kind of a big scare going on out there. Your feeder cattle board was down $5.70 for the week, in spite of being up $2.10 on Friday there for October, with it closing at 179.50. We continue to see the CME feeder cattle index running way too high. It ended the week there at 187.89. That's an extreme top for a 750-pound steer. That's not the average up through the central parts of the U.S., and it just goes to show that a lot of those cattle aren't getting put in there. Cattle market summary, our real-time index is automated, and all those cattle within those perimeters go into that average, and it's running at 176.63, which is a whole lot more logical there. But your feeder cattle, cash feeder cattle, were $5 to $10 lower this week again. But we did see some spots that makes us think that we may be getting close to the bottom near term. I still think that the cattle will be lower, 8 or 10 months from now than they are now. But near term, places like Pratt, Kansas there, they sold their bigger cattle steady to firm really after those real sharp losses they had last week, and that's a Thursday sale. Calves were $5 to $15 lower, and they're dropping faster than any other class, just by the simple fact that we've got a bunch of them to sell. We're just now barely getting into the cusp of the big calf run, and we've got a ton of those big calves to sell. Spots $20 lower on some classes of calves. A lot of your lighter weight calves that yielded $3 a pound a year ago this time are really lucky to get $2 a pound now. It just shows how fast this thing's really falling. And hate to say it, but it's going to be interesting to see the stories that come out, and there will undoubtedly be some stories about some fall delivery calves that were sold, especially early this summer, that are just a third again higher than what the market is right now. It'll be interesting to see if there are some buyers, and there will be some buyers that don't show up at delivery. Some of them just can't. Some of them may have already lost so much money and they can't show up at delivery. But we've kind of gotten used to just a measly little down payment, especially on some of your video sales, less than $50 a head, and that is not at all commensurate with what the value of that investment is. So keep your ears open for some guys. Of course, it'll ruin their reputation, and it'll ruin or take a big bite out of the guys that sold those cattle. Be interesting to see who stands a hickey on some of those big video deals. But there's a lot of cattle that are due to deliver here in the next 2 months that are way, way, way too high. But we've got dressed steer weights have ballooned up to 923 pounds on an average dressed steer. And that's from actual slaughter data that come out the middle part of September there. But we think maybe we've worked through some of those cattle now. We don't get that information for 2 or 3 weeks later, but we think we've worked through some of those giant monsters that they created out there. But still, a lot of these northern plants especially claim that they're booked up for cattle until the end of October. Nobody could see that coming. We're still at historically low market ready supplies until early next year, and it's just hard to believe that a few pounds on some of those cattle could get us in this kind of mess. But really it come down to the real tight slaughter numbers and the slow change speeds that we saw. They're starting to come up a little bit this past week. Week slaughter under federal inspection, 571,000 compared to 574,000 last week, which was the biggest we'd had for quite some time, and just 577,000 a year ago this week. But we saw some interesting things happen in the beef market earlier this week. Your cutter cow cutout on Tuesday was nearly $6 higher than your choice cutout for carcass there. And you know, that cutter cow cutout is based on an old thin cow. And you think, oh, they're not worth near what a big fat steer is. Well, maybe they're not, but the meat is. And the only reason they don't bring more than a big fat choice steer is because the dressing percentage is so much lower. But a lot of times no meat is worth any more than that real lean, 90% lean. You hear about 90% lean meat there off of those real thin shelly cows that are still healthy and don't have bad eyes, lumps and bumps or anything like that. But that meat is worth a lot of money because that goes into your grinding to make that extra lean meat that most of your housewives think that they want. Now, we used to be able to go in, and we are starting to do that some again, throwing some of those fat trimmings in and spin that lean out of there, or spin the fat out where you only have the lean meat left. But somebody went into a plant there a few years back and thought that it looked pink and mushy and didn't think it was good, and then the media got a hold of it and then it went crazy, and so we really lost all that real lean, which was 100% lean meat that was off those trimmings. But that's too bad that that deal had to happen. But then on Wednesday, though, your cutter cow cutout was down $14.73. It's like somebody looked up and said, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. And all of a sudden, your cutter cow cutout was down nearly 15 bucks in one day. So you'll probably look for your out cows to be quite a bit cheaper this week. You know, this money that's been lost in this big wreck we've seen here has pretty much gone to up in thin air. Nobody's gotten anything out of it, but your retailers seem to think that they want to get something out of it, and we always think the middleman's making some money somewhere. And retailers have yet to back off of their retail prices and are still happy to just sell a minimum amount of product at those high prices and try to make back some of that money they thought they missed out on while these prices were running so high. But we should see some more demand come back in the market. We're getting into harvest real deep, and as some of those farmer feeders complete harvest, they'll be coming back into the feeder cattle market because the corn market's not too good either. And they like to buy those big heavy calves, your big 650 and up weight calves, and for a winter project. But those calves will have to be weaned long time, more than 45 days. A lot of guys that's been getting by selling big calves right off the cow, they're going to be trained behind those weaned calves, because your farmer feeders don't want to mess with the balling calves and the sickness and stress that goes along with them. But we should see some of that demand come back in here in the next several weeks, which should prop things up a little bit. And on your fat cattle, your out months going into next spring are all in the 130s, and we sold cattle, you know, under 120 this week. So we think maybe we'll see a little bit of prop up going in there too. But this week on Friday there in Cattle Market Central, you look at Bloomington Livestock Exchange in Bloomington, Wisconsin. They sold a load of 800-pound steers at $185.50, and that would be on the strong side of what the market is right now. That pretty much wraps up your cattle market summary for this week. Check out DV Auction on Tuesday there. Southeast Livestock Exchange going to have a video auction there on DV Auction from out of Canton, North Carolina, and it's been really wet out there. They're probably needing those cattle to get somewhere and get them out of the water. And on Wednesday, Mid-Atlantic cattle sales out of Richfield, North Carolina, will be having their sale. So that's it from my home office here in Maysville, Missouri, and we'll talk to you next week.